What's going on, guys? Zuco back with another Dragonflight video. Oh, baby. We're back at it again. We are looking at the tier set list that I made. Not the tier set. The tier list that I made for melee DPS heading into Dragonflight. I made a big video about that. Had lots of great feedback from a lot of people. And some of the most notable ones was that I forgot to put my poisons on when I was testing Assassination Rogue. So we're going to go back in and we're going to look at all of the different melee DPS that I've looked at. Not all of them are getting reevaluated, but some of them are going to be moving positions within our tier list maker here. And what I'm showing you right now on screen is the original ratings that I gave to all these different specs. Okay, so I am going to be moving some of them around. In particular, the rogues are going to move. I'm going to explain why the Death Knights are up here, and I actually think I had Unholy Death Knight down here before, and I moved it up here, and I'm going to explain where that's going to go. Many of these specs are going to move within the rows that they're in, okay? So we'll get to that in a minute as well. And I'm going to explain where I'm putting Ret Paladin, Survival Hunter, Assassination Rogue in particular, Outlaw Rogue, and I think Unholy DK. Those are some of the big mentions in this video. So I don't want this to be another tier list video where I spend like 25 minutes talking about it. I just want to show you the changes that I made and explain why I've made them. And I do think that once I'm done with this video, I will be done with the melee guys. I'm not just going to make 15 tier list videos because that's pretty cringe. So let's jump right into it. Let me get my notes going on over here. Yeah, okay. So let's start with the top row, which doesn't change at all, okay? So you're looking at the S tier row. That's the guys that got a 19 to 20 score. Windwalker Monk, Enhance, Arms, and Fury. I think Fury's better than Arms, so I am going to make one switch right there. Fury's going to go ahead of Arms, but I'll show you the scores for each of the specs at the end. I've actually taken a picture of the new tier list that I'm going to make, and I have all the scores also laid out in that for you guys, so I want to make sure that I have that. Is that going to pop up right there? I don't want to ruin it right now. We'll look at it later. Okay. So, first and foremost, let's talk about the Death Knights. Frost DK was already here. Havoc was also right here. Was at the top of the A tier list. The A section, sorry. The A tier section, whatever you want to call it. So, the A tier. So, Havoc's there. It is the top dog there, followed by Frost. That hasn't changed. Frost DK, I actually saw in a bunch of dungeon footage recently, and I tried myself in a couple of dungeons, was testing with the Breath of Cinder build, and I was actually thinking of maybe lowering Frost a little bit on the totem pole, but it is actually maintaining its second place on the A tier here, because the Breath of Cinder builds have sort of come online. And I watched a video of a guy doing 300k DPS with a Breath of Cinder build in the Algathar Academy on like a +10 Mythic Plus. So I do really think that the wait, hold on. Where did I throw my there it is. Time to panic. I don't know my scarf. I'm so sorry. So what was really, really cool to see is that the Breath of Cinder build actually worked. The problem is for Frost DK is that it's very limiting. If you do a Breath of Cinder build, you have to go hard into the right-hand side of the tree, and it really limits you in terms of your ability to spec into other parts of your talent tree. So that is sort of a problem. If you're going to take the Breath of Cinder build into Mythic Plus, you're going to have less single target damage. That is just a fact. So it's still here. I like Frost DK's position, but I'm not making it like super Giga Chad good just because the Breath of Cinder stuff is working now, because you have to sacrifice a little bit. These other classes above them, Havoc DH, Enhance, Fury in particular, and Monk, they don't have to sacrifice single target damage or AoE damage. They basically get both. So that's why Frost is right here. Feral is maintaining its spot, still incredibly strong. Don't actually have a lot to say about Feral. It's very fun to play, has good, like decent single target, very good AoE now, and is much easier to play than it used to be. And we'll talk more about that in one of the other specs in a minute. So Feral is staying right there. Moving ahead of Feral, though, is actually going to be Unholy DK. So I am going to move Unholy up this far, so it's right below Frost. And it has a brand new score of 18 out of 20. So you can see it right here. So Frost already had 18 out of 20. I think I had Unholy DK at 17.5 out of 20. So it now has an 18 out of 20 score. It's moving up there. The reason is I was watching and I tried out for myself a couple of single target builds with the Unholy Frenzy talent, which is really, really strong, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So if you guys don't know, Unholy Frenzy essentially, Unholy Assault, it puts you into a frenzy. So you essentially attack the enemy. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. You attack the enemy. It puts 4 festering wounds on the enemy, and then it gives you 20% haste. And if you combine this with another talent, let me just show you on the talent tree right here. I might as well just show you. Go Tools, Talent Calculator, Demon Hunter, or Death Knight, sorry. So we have Unholy Assault right here. Puts 4 festering wounds on an enemy, gives you 20% haste. Very, very cool. If you combine that with Vile Contagion, then you can immediately spread those 4 festering wounds to all nearby enemies. And then you can start detonating them with like Scourge Strike and all that kind of stuff. So this combo was really, really cool. But Unholy Assault on its own in a single target environment was huge damage. I was getting up to like 45k sustained DPS with Unholy Assault and a couple of other talents that I was following a build that I watched somebody else do. So very, very good single target. So I bumped up Unholy DK because its single target damage got bumped up a little bit. Okay, that's the reasoning there. All right. Now, following closely behind Unholy is Feral, as I said, and then Sub is right next to it. So all of these guys are in the right place where they want to be. What is going to be added to the A tier, if anything? Who's moving up to A tier? Well, we're going to start it with Outlaw Rogue. So Outlaw Rogue is, in fact, moving up to the A tier from the B tier. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I went back and I played a bunch of dungeon runs, and I was able to get really, really crazy AoE damage going out. There is still, however, a limitation. This is why Outlaw is this far down on the A tier for me. It is behind all of these other specs, and the reason is because Outlaw Rogue is still a capped AoE spec. Ultimately, even though we've had our AoE increased in terms of Blade Rush to 8 targets instead of the old 5, it does not have the uncapped insane AoE potential of like an Unholy DK or Havoc DH for definitely. Windwalker Monk is huge. Fury Warrior has insane uncapped AoE potential. So does Arms Warrior. So there's a lot of better melee specs that can get, once you get into the 10, 15, 20 target range, which in the Algathar Academy, you can do that. You can pull that big. Outlaw Rogue just starts to fall down in the damage. Like, I was pumping damage. I was doing like 110, 120, 130k DPS, but like some of these other guys were doing 200k DPS on the big AoE packs, and I can't get my damage to be any better because I'm capped at AoE at 8 targets. Sorry. So, also, if you wanted to try and go get like Blade Rush, for example, it really messes you up on the tree. Let me just show you really quickly. So, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to go to the left side and get Blade Rush instead, because Blade Rush is uncapped AoE, and when you press Blade Flurry, it makes your damage to non-primary target is increased by 100%. So you hit all targets around the primary target, but it's still, I honestly tested it, it just still didn't do that much damage. You're better off to go down here, grab all the Blade Flurry buffs with Dancing Steel, get all this stuff, get a Green Skin Whiskers, and then just go down the middle of the tree, get Improved Adrenaline Rush, and Summarily Dispatched. If you have to go to the left side of the tree and to try and pick up Blade Rush, you have to sacrifice a lot more in the middle. So that's why Outlaw Rogue for me is staying right here. It's on the A tier, but it's on the lower side of the A tier. Okay? Moving right along, who's going to be joining, Outlaw Rogue on the A tier? We are actually going to move Ret Paladin up here as well. Now, Ret Paladin is, again, in the lower side of the A tier, and the reason for that is, again, remember, guys, that when I'm evaluating all these DPS specs, it's not just based on damage. 10 out of the 20 points that I'm giving these specs has to do with their survivability and with their utility. And the survivability for Ret Paladin is okay. They do have Blessing of Protection, which was something I didn't add in, I think, earlier when I was making a calculation. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but anyway, it is a decent amount of survivability, having Bop and Bubble and having Shielded Vengeance, but still, in terms of flat DRs, Ret Paladin has like none, right? You can see they have none. So that is extremely limiting them, extremely limiting in terms of their ability to survive. So I did bump up their survivability, I think, by 0.5, which put them And then I bumped up their AoE damage one more time by 0.5. So that puts them into the 18, a score of 18 right here, but at the bottom of the A tier list. Ret Paladin, their AoE damage is actually really disgusting, especially if you're getting reset procs on Wake of Ashes, or it depends really what build you're working on, but if you can line up all of your cooldowns and execute them properly, your AoE damage is insane. It does, however, rely on things like Divine Toll, and different AoE buttons, and it has to be within your wings, your 2-minute wings, in order to get all that damage out. And again, the reason that these other specs are above Ret Paladin is because they don't rely on those major cooldowns in order to get their damage out. They can get it out just on their own. So this is always going to be kind of what separates these specs. And again, remember, they're not really separated by that many points, guys, but I do want to make some delineation there, okay? Now, the last two. What has happened on the last two? I'm going to move one of these specs one more space, and it's going to be Assassination Rogue. It is going to come out of the C tier and move to the top of the B tier, but that's as high as it gets. Let me explain my reasoning why. When I did my testing before, I tested Assassination Rogue without having any poisons on, and unfortunately, that was a a pretty big yikes for me. I understand that, but in reality, the problem with Assassination Rogue still exists. I'm going to throw up some B-roll footage for you guys here. I'll throw it over here for you. You can watch that while we're talking here. So the reason that that Assassination Rogue still didn't move all the way up to like the A category for me was for a couple of reasons. Let me just talk about it really quickly here. So Assassination Rogue, I'll talk about the talent points in a second. They're the only class in the entire game, the only spec in the entire game that has 3 3-point talents that are blocking all of their capstones. They're gated. All their capstones are gated because of these 3-point blockers. I'll talk about those in a minute. It limits your ability and what you can build so much, and no other spec has to deal with this. Literally, the only other 3-point talent in the entire game is BM Hunter, and it blocks like the Dire Beast line. It doesn't even really matter. It's inconsequential. But for Sin Rogue, it's not inconsequential that they have all these blockers. So, I'll talk about that in a second. AoE damage with your insane cooldown, which I think I popped right here. No, I didn't. I popped that in the last pack. With Indiscriminate Carnage, the big cooldown for Assassination Rogue, your AoE damage is fantastic. Outside of your Indiscriminate Carnage window, your damage on Assassination Rogue is sort of mediocre. It's just not that great. Let me skip ahead here so I can try to see some of the AoE damage. Here's me using Indiscriminate Carnage on a smaller pack, and my damage is great. You can see it go flying up here. 90k, I almost get up to 100k there on that small pack. Absolutely, the damage is fantastic, but when I don't have my cooldown up, it's just not as good. And when you get to the really, really, really big AoE packs like this one right here, you can see that we will crest above 100k, which is really fantastic. But I don't have my cooldown up right now. I don't have Indiscriminate Carnage up right now. And so my damage is okay. It's 80k, 90k. We're trying to get above 100k, but you can see the Shadow Priest and the Warlock are at 160k. And so this is the limitation that we have as an Assassination Rogue. If you don't have your cooldown up at the right time, you lose damage. If you do have your cooldown up, that's great. You're going to do tons of damage for that one pack, but the next pack that you get to, you will do less damage than other specs that just have AoE damage for fun all the time. So this is my big beef with Assassination Rogue. The last thing I want to say about Assassination Rogue is that the ease of execution on this spec is very difficult. It's hard to execute this spec. You have to do 3 bleeds. You have Garrote, you have Ruptures, and then you also have Crimson Tempest, which you're probably going to take in Mythic Plus because it's a very, very strong bleed. So you have to manage those 3 bleeds. You have to try and press Envenom to get the Poison Bomb to proc, and you have to work within your cooldowns, and if you're not using your cooldowns effectively, your damage can definitely go down. So here's a big pack where I'm doing 84, 86, 87. I think I do spike above 100k here, but it's very difficult to kind of pull it off, and this is really the only pack where I had this kind of success, and there will be other melee specs that just are able to perform so much better than Assassination Rogue in this regard. So that's why Assassination Rogue is staying right here on the top of the B tier. It's at 17.5 now in terms of its score. It's actually good. It's just not quite there, in my opinion, even if you're using all your cooldowns correctly and you have your poisons and your bleeds kind of working for you. So that's where I'm putting it there. Survival Hunter is also staying here on the B tier, and I believe that beforehand I had it at the B tier, but it's going below Assassination Rogue. Unfortunately, Survival Hunter is fine in AoE damage, but really its single target damage, is also okay with Mongoose Bite, but the AoE damage for Survival Hunter is really dependent on your bombs, and the radius of the bombs is not that big. We used to have Wildfire Cluster, where you'd throw a bomb, and then a cluster of grenades would come out afterwards, and that actually extended your AoE range by a couple of yards. Now we only have our bombs and the radius of the bombs, and it's only like 5 to 10 yards. It's really not a big area. I had multiple moments where I would throw a bomb at a mob, and he would be moving away from the AoE pack, and like I would miss like 3 or 4 targets with my bombs. So Survival Hunter having this kind of issue to me is very frustrating to play with sometimes. And also the damage is just nowhere near as good as some of the other specs that are on this list. So that's a big deal. Okay. This is where I've moved everybody, and this is where they're staying in terms of the tier list. This is it now. This is where I want to keep everybody. So let me just show you the image that I have. The big image. I'll bring it over here. So this is the new image that I am going to put into the Discord for you guys, and I hope that you understand my reasonings here. Monk 19.5, Enhanced, Fury, and Arms are all 19. Havoc is 18.5, so I think it went up by 0.5. It's at the top of the A tier list. Frost and Unholy are sitting at 18, along with Feral, Sub, Outlaw, and Ret. So this can sometimes look a little bit deceiving, but literally everybody in this row, except for Havoc DH, Havoc is 0.5 above the rest. Frost, Unholy, Feral, Sub, Outlaw, and Ret all have a score of 18. So they're all doing very, very well. And this is why tier lists can sort of be frustrating sometimes. I want to make sure I show you these scores, because it might help you guys to have a better understanding of like, okay, I want to play Ret Paladin, but it looks like it's in a really bad spot on the tier list. It's actually not. It's tied with all these other ones, okay? Then we have Sin Rogue at 17.5, and we have Survival at 17 at the very bottom, okay? Those are the final scores, guys, for all of these specs. Let me just make sure. I want to say really clearly, thank you guys so much for your feedback. It was awesome. Remember that these tier lists are on a scoring system, and that scoring system is dependent on utility, and it's also dependent on your survivability. So there's 10 points for damage, and then there's 10 points for the other stuff. Okay, so if the survivability and the utility was struggling a little bit, then that's going to hurt your score overall. And then, for example, that's Survival Hunter in a nutshell. So those are my rankings, guys. Those are my melee DPS. That's the tier list for melee DPS heading into Dragonflight. I'm not going to change it after this. So this is kind of my final verdict on all of these different specs and where they land. And I'm going to put this in my Discord. If you're not in my Discord yet, join the party, join the crew, and you'll get access to this big picture, and you can take a look at it and make a decision for yourself which melee DPS spec is right for you moving into Dragonflight. I'll also post, obviously, I have this posted as well. I will try to update the Microsoft Word document that I have going here, and I'll post that for you guys as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys. This is my updated tier list for melee DPS heading into Dragonflight. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much again for watching. I love you all. I'll see you in the next one.